Good morning. What is wrong with Peruvian builders? Like, can none of them finish a job? Like, seriously, have you noticed this? When you were walking around yesterday in Salaverry or Trujillo, again tomorrow in Lima, nothing seems to be finished. It's like they start a project and then at some point get distracted and forget to turn up for work the next day to complete things. It's as if every single house has unfinished walls or the odd rebar just popping out, just waiting for something else to happen, for no apparent reason. You wouldn't design a house like that. Would you design a house like that? Walk through Lima's suburbs and you'll see rooftops crowned with rusting rebar, bare concrete walls, and structures that seem to be perpetually waiting for a final coat of paint. Entire neighborhoods look like eternal construction sites, even though many of these homes are fully furnished inside. And so many buildings in Peru seem to have this awkward, half-built second floor, often topped with a lonely clothesline and a single plastic chair to complete the look. When I was younger, my sister and I used to play the why game. And actually, somewhat surprisingly, I've seemingly made a career out of that game. The game's very simple, and it's really irritating if you're the victim of it. Because there's only one rule. Keep asking why. Why? Because eventually, you'll actually get the answer. And one of the first questions I wanted to know the answer to when I stepped foot in Peru was, why does that house look like that? The answer? Because it's not finished. And then you ask the next why. Why is it not finished? Why did you move in without finishing it? Why is the house next door not finished? Why is there so much unfinished business in Peru? Well, the answer is quite amusing, and it gives a little insight into the country that we're currently visiting. It is absolutely deliberate that all of these houses look unfinished, and they will always look unfinished. Because here's the twist. They're not actually unfinished. They just pretend to be. So let's find out why. Back at the latter half of the last century, Peru was facing a bit of a crisis. The country has a growing population. Cities were booming, but there wasn't enough affordable housing for everyone. So a group of well-intentioned lawmakers sitting in some grand government office came up with a wonderful idea that was going to fix the housing market and get the country on its feet again. They were going to help ordinary Peruvians build their dream homes without the crushing burden of excessive taxes. Very mindful, very demure. Now, your everyday Peruvian was, and is, practically minded and savvy. So many families would build their homes piecemeal, bit by bit. When you need an extra room, you build the extra room. And the government wanted to support the country's self-builders. So they said, let's make this easier. Let's adjust the property tax system so that you're taxed on the finished state of the building. If your house isn't completed yet, it's not really fair to make you pay the full rate yet. You haven't got a full house yet. So the bill was signed into law with the noble idea of encouraging long-term construction, home ownership, and economic growth. What a beautiful idea. What an obvious loophole. Now, I've already told you that Peruvians are resourceful, and so it really didn't take very long for word to get around that if a building was never officially finished, it would never be taxed at full value. And so, for the past 50 or so years, Peru has been in a constant state of under construction. Concrete skeletons with rebar sprouting like metal weeds, walls left unpainted on purpose, and mysterious half-built second floors that will never likely get a roof. From unfinished business, let's look at another classic Peruvian business. Bird business. Guano. Bird poo. In the 19th century, Peru had a crap economy. Literally. It was one of the wealthiest nations in Latin America, and it was all thanks to bird poo. Peru is located perfectly for the constant splatting of flying pellets of bird doo-doo. And it all starts in the water. The ocean is responsible for a lot of things on this planet. Now, if you've ever been to Peru before, you might have gone for a swim in the sea. And you might have been surprised by how cold it is. We're just below the equator, but the sea is chilly, chilly cold. That's odd. Why? What's going on there? Well, the answer lies in one of the most powerful currents in the world, the Humboldt current. A cold water current that has shaped the entire economy of this country. Here's how it works. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, a massive underwater superhighway of cold water flows northward from Antarctica, hugging the coast of Chile and Peru. But this isn't just any old cold water. It's nutrient-packed. It's coming from the depths where organic matter decays. And when these deep, nutrient-rich waters rise to the surface near Peru, they are part of a process called upwelling. And upwelling is like fertilizing the ocean. It brings up phytoplankton, which feeds the tiny creatures called zooplankton, which in turn feed the fish. And before you know it, you've got a full oceanic buffet that supports one of the richest fisheries in the world. Thanks to the Humboldt current, Peru's waters are basically fish heaven. And the most famous guest? Anchovies. Millions of them. These little fish form the backbone of Peru's fishing industry, which supplies fish meal for global agriculture and feeds people worldwide. At its peak, Peru had pulled in millions of tons of anchovies every year, making it one of the world's top fishing nations. Interestingly, at least to me, Britain was historically the top buyer of Peru's fish meal, largely thanks to a spectacularly favourable treaty the UK signed with Peru to support their independence from Spain, which gave Britain first pickings and favourable trading conditions with this newly independent country. But Britain became so dependent on Peruvian fish meal to feed our pigs that in 1972, when overfishing in the Pacific caused Peru's supply of fish meal to collapse, the price of British bacon doubled overnight. Anyway, it wasn't just British pigs who loved the taste of Peruvian anchovies. Seabirds just couldn't get enough of what the Humboldt current was bringing up to the coast of Peru. I mean, did you see how many birds there were around that port yesterday? Peru is home to millions of seabirds, including cormorants, boobies, pelicans, frigate birds, all of whom dive, skim, or swoop to snatch up the fish. The Peruvian booby, Sula variegata, and the guane cormorant, which is the Phallocrocorax bougainvillei. Who names these things? They're the real stars of the show. They dominate the rocky islands and the coastal cliffs where they nest in enormous colonies. And these birds don't just nibble on the fish supply. They devour it by the ton, consuming thousands of tons of anchovies daily. And this constant feeding comes with consequences. Guano. Heaps and heaps of guano. For centuries, seabird droppings accumulated on the rocky islands off Peru's coast, forming massive deposits of nitrogen-rich fertilizer. Back in the 1880s, some of these stacks of dried bird poo had reached 30 meters tall. and Peru was exporting their guano worldwide. The Western world was going absolutely cuckoo for the stuff. In fact, in 1856, the United States government did something truly bizarre. It passed a law that basically said, if you find an island covered in bird droppings and no one else owns it, congratulations, it's yours. Really, that was the essence of the Guano Islands Act. Guano, which, let's face it, is just a fancy word for seabird droppings, was the best fertilizer in the world, and the US didn't want to be beholden to Peru's monopoly. As a result of that law, American citizens annexed more than 50 islands, and many of them are still US territory today. Can you think of a stranger reason to claim an island than it's covered in bird poo? But as massive as guano was, really it was just a passing moment, quite literally for the bird. A combination of over-extraction, war with Chile, and scientific progress threw Peru from its guano heyday into an economic quagmire that lasted decades. By the turn of the 20th century, Peru's economy really was down the pan. Let's go back to the portal, and we're now going to take a look at our next port of call, Callao for Lima. So, this is the port of Callao. As you can see, it's another one of these ports with nothing there. You're walking out just onto the dockside. The buses will wait there, both shore excursion buses and the shuttle buses. So that's what the bus symbol is for. Now, I have put taxi in red here. Why have I put taxi in red? There are going to be tons of taxis waiting outside. Don't take those ones. The taxis that wait just outside the port at Callao are notorious for petty crime. They wait because it's easy pickings. So, the very best advice is take that shuttle bus all the way through to Miraflores and sort your onward travel from there. Much, much safer. That's the tourist center. Callao is a little bit grittier. So, the shuttle bus will be running through most of the day, but in the night, it won't be running. So at night, if you are staying out later, let's say you want to come back at 9 o'clock, you won't be able to take a shuttle bus back. What you do at that point is you take an Uber or a taxi from Miraflores, and they'll take you right up to the port gate. You show your ID at the port gate, you walk straight through. Once you're behind the walls of the port gate, you're absolutely fine and safe. But Callao itself is a little grittier. And here's an idea of the journeys that we're going to be doing. So we're where the ship is, that's in Callao. We're going to take the shuttle bus, 15 kilometers. So it's quite a long shuttle bus, this one. And we're going to take it down to Miraflores. Miraflores, major tourist center of Lima. And Barranco, which we were talking about in the coffee chat this morning as well, which is just neighboring district, is just further along that seafront road. The other box at the top there, that is the historic center of Lima, the downtown area. That's a further 10 kilometers or 45-minute drive from Miraflores. So there's no shuttle bus that will go directly there. Every shuttle bus will go between Miraflores and Callao. And then from Miraflores, you can then make your way on if you would like to go into the downtown area. And again, just repeating the advice from inside our coffee chat, if you are heading into the downtown area, that's best done in daylight hours, and it's best to come back to the main tourist center of Miraflores if you want to stay out into the evening. So, I'm going to give you 5 highlights of Miraflores area, then I'll give you 10 further highlights of the historic downtown itself. So, let's start with the Museo de Arte Contemporáneo, MAC Lima. This is in Miraflores, and it is the go-to spot for modern and contemporary art in Lima. It's a small, but it's well-curated museum. It's got bright open spaces. There's rotating exhibitions featuring both Peruvian and international artists. And if you are into bold, thought-provoking art, then this is a good place to visit. Even if modern art isn't your thing, The museum's got a lovely outdoor space, great spot to relax with the coffee. It's not huge, you're not going to need more than an hour to enjoy it, but it's a cool way to see what's happening in Lima's contemporary art scene. Now, if you're looking for a quick beach stop in Miraflores, Playa Waikiki, which I thought was in Hawaii, and Playa Makaha are your best bets, and they are also the closest beaches to the shuttle bus stop. Now, these aren't white sand tropical paradise beaches, but they're great for surfing, they're good for sunbathing, or just watching the waves and soaking it up. Waikiki, which is the northern of the two beaches, is particularly popular with beginner surfers, whereas Makaha draws in locals and tourists for slightly more powerful waves. There are surf schools if you would like to give it a go, or if you already surf but you didn't bring your board with you, there are board rentals on the beach as well. So there's this chill seaside vibe. The water actually is chilly, but the views are solid, and if nothing else, it's just a great place to sit on the rocks and soak up that Pacific breeze. Or you go shopping. Larcomar is not your average shopping mall. It is built right into the cliffs of Miraflores with killer ocean views that you won't find in a typical retail spot. You've got a mixture of international brands, Peruvian designers, plenty of souvenir options, but honestly, the real draw is the location. Whether you're grabbing a coffee, having a meal, just strolling around, the Pacific backdrop makes everything better. There's also a cinema, a few bars, some solid dessert spots as well. We were talking so much about food this morning, so really good local spot for getting some local food. Even if you're not shopping, this place is worth a visit just to take in the view and that seaside atmosphere. Number 4, the Faro La Marina, the Marine Lighthouse, is one of Miraflores' most iconic spots. It's sitting right on the Malecon with some of the best Pacific views in Lima. It's painted deep blue and white, and it is still an active lighthouse, but these days it's become more of a scenic hangout than a maritime necessity. Locals and tourists, they're all coming here. They chill on the grass, they snap photos. You could watch the paragliders soaring overhead, which is really fun. If you're a paraglider, you can watch the lighthouse. It's a perfect spot for a sunset stroll along the cliffs. Grab a snack, find that good beach spot, enjoy the view. It's great, no tickets, no fuss. It is just a great place to relax and safe into the evening as well. Final one for Miraflores, Love Park. Parque del Amor. This is Miraflores' tribute to romance, and in particular famous for El Beso, which is a striking sculpture of a couple locked in what looks like an intensely passionate kiss. This was created by Peruvian artist Victor Delfin, and it is a bold celebration of love, fittingly placed where couples gather together to enjoy the ocean views. The park's got these colourful mosaic walls as well. They're covered in romantic quotes, just adding to the charm. And it is a great spot to sit, relax, the paragliders flying ahead. Whether you're here to see the art, whether you're here just to enjoy the atmosphere, or people watch, sometimes the people watching here is a little bit sickening. Just warning you, but this is one of the most memorable stops along Lima's Malecon. So here's a map of those highlights. This is the Miraflores region of Lima. All right, let's continue now into the downtown area. So here's the map again. We're now going to go inside the light blue square. Again, in order to get to the light blue square, you would take the shuttle bus to Miraflores, and then you would take onward transport to the downtown, whether that's the metro system or a taxi or an Uber. If you are taking an Uber, then you might be looking at as much as a 45-minute drive just because of inner city traffic. But you should be paying no more than $20 to have that inner city taxi. If you're lucky, you might be able to get that down nearer to 10. Let's go through our top 10. All right, Playa Mayor de Lima is the city's historic heart. It is the kind of place where you sort of half expect conquistadors to still be riding through, because this is where Lima began. It is still surrounded by some of its most important buildings, like the government palace, the Cathedral of Lima, the Archbishop's Palace, all of that showing off the grand Spanish colonial style. Now, the plaza itself is a really lively spot. It's got these fancy bronze fountains in the middle, plenty of locals and tourists milling around, and it is an ideal place for soaking up Lima's history, snapping some amazing photos, and just grabbing a bench, and then watch the city go by. I mentioned the cathedral. That's right there on the square. The Cathedral of Lima dominates the Plaza Mayor with its grand twin towers and this intricate facade, and it has been standing here since 1535. It has had a few rebuilds since then because Lima is victim to a few earthquakes, but on this site has been the Cathedral of Lima for all that time. And you step inside, it's a mix of ornate chapels, high ceilings, a whole lot of gold. One of the highlights is the tomb of Francisco Pizarro, the Spanish conquistador who colonized Peru and founded the city of Lima. He called it the City of Kings when he founded it. Whether you're into history, architecture, just looking for a cool, quiet spot to escape the city buzz, this place is really worth a visit. A bonus if you really love dramatic wooden choir stalls, because they've got some really nice ones here. Let's go to a palace. So also in the main square, at the other side of the square, is the Palacio Municipal de Lima, the city hall. This stands out with its bright yellow facade, grand balconies, because if you're running a city, you might as well do it in style. And this is where Lima's municipal government does its thing. But it's also got some hidden gems inside. Now, the interior courtyard is well worth the peek, and there is a small museum in here with historical documents and artifacts. And while you can't wander around the whole site freely, there are guided visits that are available. But even if you're just admiring it from the outside, it's a key part of Lima's colonial charm. Now we're going to go a little bit outside of that main center, 15-minute drive or so south, and you've got the Circuito Mágico del Agua, which is basically a water and light show on steroids. And you find it in Parque de la Reserva. It is not just one fountain. There are 13 fountains, and they don't just sit there looking pretty. Some shoot water 80 feet into the air. Others have tunnels that you can walk through without hopefully getting soaked. And the biggest one does a full-on laser and music show at night. It's fun, it's family-friendly. Honestly, it's a very exciting way to see Lima in a different light, literally. And if you're up for something unique, it is a good evening stop. Just be aware in the evening of your surroundings for your safety. The Museo Metropolitano de Lima, not your typical museum with dusty artifacts. This is a high-tech multimedia experience that brings Lima's history to life. They've got 3D projections, interactive exhibits, immersive storytelling, and what you'll get is a crash course on the city's past, from its pre-Hispanic roots right the way through to modern-day Lima. And this is in Parque de la Exposición, which is a museum park. It's home to other great museums as well, so you could combine a visit here with the Museo de Arte de Lima, also known as Mali, and the Museo de Arte Italiano. If you want to understand Lima beyond its colonial buildings, this is a great place to go. Plus, the whole park itself is beautiful to have a wander. The Museo Nacional de Cultura Peruana is all about Peruvian folk art and traditions, showcasing the country's indigenous cultural diversity. So for a moment, forget golden artifacts, forget colonial paintings, because this museum focuses on hand-woven textiles, carved gourds, pottery, masks, religious art from different regions of Peru. It's a great place to see how traditional crafts have evolved over time, how they still play a huge role in Peruvian identity today. And again, this one is located near Parque de la Exposición, but it's a quieter, it's an underrated museum. But if you're really into authentic local culture and everyday artistry, then this is well worth a visit. Plus, of course, there's the bonus that it is rarely crowded. It's also closed on both days of our visit. That's why it's not going to be crowded. Shall we move to number 7? Simon Bolivar Square in Lima is a tribute to the legendary South American liberator. And while it's not as famous as Plaza Mayor, it is still worth a visit. At its center stands a statue of Bolivar himself, looking every bit the heroic figure who freed Peru from Spanish rule. The square itself is surrounded by important government buildings, including the Peruvian Congress and the National Library. So it's a really key political spot in town. It's quieter, it's less touristy, but if you're into history or just want a peaceful place to sit, it is a solid spot whilst exploring Lima's downtown. Plus, it's very difficult to close a park on a Monday. All right, this one's open on a Monday. The church and convent of Santo Domingo is one of Lima's oldest religious sites, dating back to the early days of Spanish rule. And it was founded by the Dominican order, whose friars arrived with Francisco Pizarro during the conquest of Peru. You might remember Friar Vicente de Valverde. He played that critical role. He was the one who handed the Bible over. He was Pizarro's chaplain, and so he was president when the Spanish captured the Incan Emperor Atahualpa in 1532. It was his hand that passed over the Bible. Now, the convent itself is a peaceful escape, beautiful cloisters, colonial tile work. It's got a stunning library. It is also the resting place of Saint Rose of Lima and Saint Martin de Porres. Something a little different. I love theatre. If you love theatre, the Museo Metropolitano del Teatro in Lima is a great stop to explore the city's performing arts scene. And it is housed inside Teatro Segura, which is Lima's oldest theatre, dating back to 1909. Now, the theatre itself is stunning. Classic European-style architecture, red velvet seats, a grand stage that's seen decades of performances. But then the museum dives into Lima's wider theatrical history with costumes on display, vintage posters, behind-the-scenes stories from famous productions. Again, another one which isn't a massive museum, but this is a fascinating look at Peru's theatre world. And if you're lucky and you are deciding to stay in town tomorrow, you could even go and see a show at the historic venue itself. Final one, number 10, the balconies. Lima's historic wooden balconies are like ornate time capsules hanging over the streets with their intricately carved designs and old-world charm. Built during Spanish colonial rule in the 17th and 18th centuries, these were originally a status symbol. The fancier your balcony, the wealthier the owner. And today, there are around 1,600 of them that still decorate the city, especially along Calle Betia and Giron Ucayali. Now, there are two particular ones that are standout spots. Osambela Palace, with its gorgeous blue facade, and then there's the elegant Torre Tagle Palace. Whether you're interested in the history, whether you just want a good Instagram shot, these are the most gorgeous backdrops for you in Lima. Architectural gems. Here is the map of our downtown Lima highlights. As you can see, pretty much everything very bunched together around the Plaza Mayor de Lima. So if you're heading in there, that's a good place to get your Uber driver. Just take you there. because then you've got, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things very, very close together. If you're more of a museum person, then I would recommend that you ask them to take you to the museum park, because there are 3 or 4 museums around that park itself, and you're going to have a splendid day in that area. You wouldn't want to walk between the two. You would want to get a taxi or an Uber between those 2 zones of the downtown. Tomorrow, we're going to see Lima as it currently is. That seems like an odd thing to say. That's sort of obvious. So obvious that it's something we often overlook. There's a permanence bias in our outlook. Just because something comes across that it is as it is, we assume that it is as it is, and therefore it was as it is, and it will be as it is. To put it another way, how we see it now must be the final piece. And yet, when we start to think about it, that's not true. That's never been true. So going back to Lima's eternally unfinished skyline, what message can we extract from that? Well, maybe that tax avoidance can have pretty ugly consequences. But I don't think that's the ultimate lesson here. When we look at Peru's messily constructed houses, deliberately unfinished, I see an upbeat message from a culture that reminds us not to judge based on looks. But when I consider Peru's guano roller coaster as well, I can't help but think that nothing is ever complete. Even if they plastered the walls, painted them, even if they put a roof over the second level, even if they put a pane of glass in that open window frame, the house still wouldn't be finished. In England, there are houses dating back to the 12th century that are still being developed and worked on. People saw the guano industry as the end result, but it wasn't. I wonder if the admittedly naive, unfinished property law shows a greater understanding of life. Life's just a whole load of unfinished business. You don't need to finish it. Just enjoy living it. Thank you.